Dave Isaac at Dave G. Isaac on Twitter from the Courier Post and 97.3 ESPN.com. Dave's got plenty of coverage of this today, and I guess, Dave, a very mixed emotion type of day for the Flyers. You know, they had the win over the weekend and then last night to get them into the playoffs, and then they learned of the passing today. Kind of mixed emotions for this organization.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, Mike, where I think everybody was preparing for this for a while, for several months, really. But it didn't make it any less devastating for anybody in the organization. 3 players came out today, Claude Giroux, Wayne Simmons, Jake Voracek, and Ron Hextall, and all of them really had you could tell, had some tears in their eyes talking about Ed Snider. Dave Hextall spoke as well. It's one of those situations where, you know, even if you thought you had a date in mind for when it might happen, this team's, you know, absolutely devastated by the loss of their chairman and founder, and it's something where you wonder how it'll affect them down the road. I mean, this is a team that really had to exhaust itself just to get to the playoffs, and their reward is facing the best team in the NHL, and now they deal with another emotional roller coaster ride here. So it'll be interesting to see how the Flyers react Game 1 on Thursday.
Yeah, Dave, and he's the only owner this team has known. 50 years coming up next year of existence, and you know, without him being the guy who brought hockey to Philadelphia, who knows where this sport would be in this city. I know it's really hard on the day, but you know, him being the only guy who has ever been the owner of this franchise, is he known as the chairman of the Flyers, or is he bigger than that?
No, he's absolutely bigger than that. I mean, he's known as obviously the guy who brought the franchise here, but when you look and kind of widen the scope there and look in the sport as a whole, you see all the statements pouring in from different people. Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, he was somebody who leaned on Ed Snider quite a bit. He was part of the competition committee. Ron Hextall was talking about that at the general managers meeting a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, that they're bringing up the competition committee and Ed Snider. And obviously Snider wasn't there, but that's the effect that he has on the sport, that everybody at a large gathering of league-wide managers bring up his name and are thinking about him and talking about him. And I think that says something about the guy, not just what he's done here in Philadelphia, but for the sport as a whole.
Dave, you know, obviously as a guy in the media covering this team, what made the Flyers unique with Mr. Snider as the owner? What were some of the biggest things that he will be remembered for, not only just with the Flyers, but in the NHL? What are some of the biggest impacts that he had?
Well, it was always a treat to talk to him because you never knew what was going to happen. And all the players and you know, the coach and the general manager today talk about his passion, and that's why you never knew what was going to happen. It wasn't like you're talking to some crazy person. But you never knew what Ed Snider was going to say because of just how emotional he is about the Flyers and about the sport. So it was always interesting to hear his take because you knew it was going to be unfiltered. And you knew he wasn't really going to hold back. There were certainly some times that probably, in retrospect, he wished he had held back and didn't. So he was always a treat to talk to for that, and I think that's going to be one of the lasting things. But also, what a lot of people are talking about today, and what he talked about in some of his last years as to how he wanted to be remembered was his foundation. He told me last year when I was doing a story on hockey in South Jersey, he said it's the Youth Hockey Foundation, that the only thing that he's put his name on, that's what he wanted his legacy to be. I think you'll be reading that and seeing that in a lot of interviews in the next few days here.
Yeah, and obviously with such success early in their existence, the Flyers kind of jumped onto the map, Dave, and you know, for better or worse, sometimes criticized, but they basically have kept that similar identity that they were from their infancy all the way to where they are today. And I guess patience worked out for them. They land Ron Hextall, who has really morphed this into a different thinking organization, yet keeping it in the family. So it's kind of ironic that in his last couple of years here, that patience was something that worked out for him because it was something that he had been criticized about a lot through his ownership.
Yeah, and Ron Hextall told an interesting story today that I hadn't heard before, and he's always asked about his plan and patience for the future and not bringing up young guys too soon and not, expelling a bunch of money in free agency and trading draft picks away. And he's always said that Snider was on board with that when he became the general manager after he took over for Paul Holmgren. But what he said today was that Snider told him, the reason that we won our first cup was because I was patient. I don't know what happened. So that was kind of a funny little anecdote that Snider said that he originally was trying to be patient himself and then kind of got away from it. But I think you're right. There's a little bit of symmetry there that he knew that the team would be, or he thought that the team would be in good hands with Ron Hextall at the helm. And that's the way that the Flyers are trying to go forward. And all the players that spoke today were just happy that they could be in the playoffs to keep this run going with him in mind.
Dave Isaac's with us looking at the Flyers and the passing of Ed Snider, and obviously there is some happy times for the Flyers because they are back in the playoffs, which it looked like it was going to happen 2 weeks ago. It looked improbable almost on Friday, and here we are on Monday getting ready for a series against the Washington Capitals. If you can kind of encapsulate this month here, Dave, what's flipped here for this team that we're talking about a team going to the playoffs? Because many people thought this would be a rebuilding year, one that would be maybe in play for the number 1 overall pick. People thought they could be that kind of team. What really has this team in the playoffs starting Thursday night?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, this whole year has been kind of a whirlwind in all the different things that have happened. I mean, without Steve Mason these last 4 weeks or so, the wheels could have easily come off. As much as Ron Hextall probably doesn't like to admit it, I think the turning point of this season was when Shane Gostisbehere came up from the minor leagues. I know that he still wants Gostisbehere to kind of take it easy and not go a mile a minute, but I think this team couldn't score a goal. They couldn't buy a goal before Gostisbehere got called up. He has that incredible streak of points in 15 straight games. Before his goal yesterday, his first 16 goals, all of them, either tied the game, gave the Flyers the lead, or won the game. So he's been a clutch player for them. It sounds cliche when they say that they need everybody, but when you look at all the injuries they've had, they basically had to use everybody just to get here. So it's been a little bit of everything. Most recently, though, I would say that Steve Mason is the reason why this team is in the playoffs, or at least the past month.
Yeah, and Dave, they're in. They got a tall task ahead, and they don't have a great path through this Eastern Conference. I mean, even if you look ahead, they were to get by Washington, Pittsburgh, or New York staring at you in that second bracket there. So it will not be a easy road for them. But you feel like this team just started to play well, and then they had that little bump in the road. What happened on Saturday? That looked like a completely different team than the one we saw the week before against Pittsburgh, Dave, but also that we saw against Detroit and Toronto, where they looked almost like they were, in slow motion.
Yeah, and you know what? Saturday was no gimme. The Penguins ended up having to use their third-string goalie. They sat Sidney Crosby. They sat Chris Letang. That they had so much working in their favor. If they had found a way to lose Saturday, that would have been the case. They would have found a way to lose because everything was working in their favor from the early games. The results there giving the Flyers a scenario in which they could win and get in. And it's something where they really just they took advantage of it, I guess, but barely.
Dave Isaac, everyone, we'll have plenty more on this Flyers Capitals series as the week goes on. At Dave G. Isaac for more coverage of Mr. Snider and the Flyers and the Capitals. Dave, appreciate it, pal.
Thanks, Mike.